After we all click that we're okay with being recorded. Yeah, we have an extremely exciting guest today. I've been really looking forward to this, and we will introduce this one of the leading scientists in consciousness and mind-body science, which is the most important science in the history of science. So this is really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I wanted to open it with a short video that has two purposes. One is that it explains the gist of the Global Transformation Project and the possibility that it offers the planet, and in the hope that everybody will sign the petition and start getting involved in globaltransformationproject.org, which is a global coalition of mind-body practitioners and scientists and health and education experts. But the other thing that's happening during the course of this video is you're seeing me shoot free throws at the basketball court. And what happened was I've been practicing mind-body practices, meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, some yoga, and of course mindfulness is part of all this for many years. But I didn't really unlock the potential of these mind-body practices within myself to the level that they could be, or to a higher level that I found that they could go to, until I spent all these months talking to all these scientists, just like the scientists that we're going to have on today. And the science that's coming out, it shows that human consciousness, the potential of human consciousness is so much more vast. And the potential of mind-body to help us unlock and rediscover, in some cases, this lost potential that we had when we were children, to a whole other levels. Being exposed to this, it just blew the doors off the limitations of my consciousness. And then this mind-body practice that I'm practicing went to whole new levels. And the way that it was evidenced was I started going to the gym to shoot free throws to get away, just get away from the computer, because I do so much computer work organizing these world events. And anyway, I just started realizing that I was trying to apply all this stuff. And stuff that people all over the planet are practicing. I'm not saying that my practice is the special practice. Everybody has practice. I'm saying that this science can help you unlock the potential of whatever you're doing. So anyway, I started going to the gym, just get away from the computer. And I started realizing that as I was applying these principles, I hardly ever missed. I hardly ever missed at the free throw line. And then I heard a couple of kids talking one day, and one of them pointed at me and told the other kid, "Oh, there's that guy that never misses." And so then I decided to bring my camera into the gym, and I just turned it on and set it up and just shot about 50 baskets. And then when I got home, I tallied up the shots, and what I found was that I was shooting. There's 450 National Basketball Association players in the NBA, Professional Basketball League in the United States, and I was shooting better than 435 of them at the free throw line. And I was terrible at basketball in school. So it's just the mind-body practice, and then becoming aware of the science of consciousness and who we are and what our potential is, that unlock the potential of those mind-body practices. And so anyway, all that's evidenced in this video. So I just wanted to kind of let you know where we're going. So now I'm going to share a screen. And Siobhan, I can't share. You have to give me permission or whatever.
Oh.
Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Hold on. I have to make you a co-host. So give me a second to
no problem.
Do that.
Yeah, thanks.
I gotta find you on the screen. There you are. Okay.
Yeah, and I know Dr. Delorme is going to be talking about mind wandering in his
new book.
Go. And that really resonated with me, because when I'm going into this process of this shooting, it's like, if my mind wanders, I know I'm going to miss it. And so, yeah, I'm hoping maybe we can talk about that a little bit later.
My mind focused, and you're ready to share.
Okay, here we go. Now, let me open something. Okay, and then this, and then maximize. And oh, you know what? I got to stop the share. I don't think I turned on the sound. Let me do that. Let me do it again. I always forget to do that. Okay, share sound. There we go. All right, so that's good. And now I think I just need to hit play. How do I do that? I just wanted to mention, just real quick, this discussion series, this monthly discussion series, Dr. C.J. Rhodes and Siobhan Hutchinson here has really been the backbone of this thing. And this has been one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life because, as I mentioned before we turned the cameras on, this is the most important science being done in the history of science, according to Nikola Tesla. And I don't think there's anybody in science that could argue with Nikola Tesla. And so, you know, these people should be on all the major TV programs talking about the science that we expose people to in this extraordinary series that's Dr. C.J. Rhodes and Siobhan Hutchinson have made possible. And it's just, you know, we organized World Tai Chi Day, which Princeton University Director of Research showed how we had actually changed global consciousness. But I've got to tell you, you know, even though we've experienced doing Tai Chi with the whole planet for 24 years now, and that we actually changed global consciousness, this discussion series has been like the most spectacular event of my life. To have the ability to sit here with these folks and talk about the most important science being done in the history of science. And this platform provides data and science and information that has profoundly changed not only the way I do Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation, but the way I teach Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation, and the way that I do everything in my life. This has been truly life transformative for me to be exposed to all this data and all this information about these mind-body practices that I've been doing for 45 years. And I don't think there's a mind-body person on the planet who wouldn't experience the same benefits that I have from this discussion series. So it's really important that everybody share these videos that we produce for free. One of the things that that we got involved with was you may or may not be familiar with it, I don't know, and there may be different versions of this. I'm not trying to just promote this one company, but there's a thing called Muse, a headband that'll sync with your phone, and then it can detect your brain waves, and then you can find out when you're in alpha state, essentially, or the percentage of time you're in alpha state. And that was extremely helpful. And then, you know, as we, you know, became aware of all the science that was just showing that it's really a huge miss by humanity not to be teaching kids how to do mind-body practices starting in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. We have a United Nations resolution. Everybody can sign the petition to advocate for a non-mandatory suggestive United Nations resolution advocating mind-body education K through 12 in public education worldwide. And what we're advocating is what we call the Big Five, because they have, you know, in some cases millennia of research behind them, but they have a huge amount of modern medical scientific research. And that's Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, yoga, and mindfulness. And so as I'm going through all this science, you know, it becomes increasingly apparent that what makes them special is that alpha state component. You know, in Tai Chi, we talk about Wu Wei and flow and things like that. But, you know, from doing Tai Chi and Qigong for 45 years, it's real obvious to me that when I'm in that state, it's alpha state. Because you get, you know, once one of my students got me the Muse headband, you know, it was like, that's when I realized, oh, okay, that's what this feeling is. And so we realize now that, you know, if we get this into public education, it'll be quite easy to determine whether children are going into alpha state. And it wouldn't be like we're introducing a foreign concept. Dr. Spady mentioned that Dr. Bruce Lipton suggested that kids are in alpha state a lot of the time up into about 7 years old. And then that's when learning starts to slow down and everything, and we start to get we start to lose touch with that ability to go into alpha state, which again I think is quite natural, because you know, you were mentioning your experience in nature and how these things and some other aspect of this. And I remember when I was a little kid, and I would walk in the wheat fields when the wheat was ripe, because I lived in a small farming town, and I'd walk in the wheat fields and you just have that drone of the wind blowing through those wheat heads, and there was nobody out there but me and my dog, you know. And I realized now, looking back, I was going into alpha state. It would happen, and then I would come out of it, you know, within a couple of seconds, and I think, wow, what just happened? Where did I go? You know what I mean? Because I was. All right, so there we go. So I'm looking forward to this.
That was great. Thank you, Bill. So, welcome everybody. I'm Siobhan, and you're with the Global Transformation Project. This is a free monthly program where you can meet researchers of mind body practices. And as Bill was saying, our mission is to educate the public about the far reaching health and cost savings of these practices while providing the science behind them. We encourage you all to sign our petition to the UN. We're serious about this to make these practices available in our educational systems worldwide. And I will put our.
One thing I want to clarify, Siobhan,
Sure.
one thing I want to clarify to everybody is we're not trying to be the people who teach public school children all over the world. This isn't about Bill Douglas's Tai Chi class or Siobhan's meditation classes or anything like that. We're volunteers. What we want to do is we want to get all the mind-body teachers, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, recognized for their value by local school districts, local school health education ministries. And we want to get mind-body teachers all over the planet who want to teach children and know how to teach children into the public school system as part of public education so that kids are learning mind-body practices. Because what World Tai Chi Day taught us was that mind-body teachers are all over the planet. Everything is in place. The science is there because of people like the doctor that we're going to have on today. And the mind-body teachers are all over the planet. It would just be a really easy thing to get those people into public education. It would save trillions of dollars. So I just want to make sure everybody understands we're not trying to be the go-to for schools all over the planet. That we don't have an angle here. We want all the other mind-body teachers around the planet who are doing beautiful work to be in their local public education system. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you, Bill. So I'm going to put Bill here too. Okay, so welcome again, everybody, and please, if you can, sign the petition. That would be super, and we're all volunteers. None of us make any money. And so if you purchase the t-shirt that Bill is wearing, again, it's in this year, the 25th anniversary of the original World Tai Chi and Qigong Day t-shirt is in purple and gold for our 25th anniversary that Bill and Angela started. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Arnaud Delorme, and I'm going to spotlight you. Hello and welcome. He has been studying human consciousness for over 20 years, and he is a scientist at IONS, and this is a very famous center. It's the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and he actually created a free system, a software system, EEG Lab, which I cannot pronounce, and he'll be explaining how that measures brain activity, especially during meditation. And he has a keen interest in the scientific study of consciousness and spirituality. He is a longtime Zen meditator and is taught in India. He is the author of over 160 publications, as well as a book entitled Why Our Minds Wander, Understand the Science and Learn to Focus Your Thoughts. And we are so delighted to have you today, Doctor, and thank you so much for coming on board. And I'll put on in the chat your contact information, okay?
Thank you.
Would you like to start by telling us, we've had other scientists come on and they've defined what they perceive as consciousness. Do you want to start there? What is consciousness?
Sure. So I can tell this story. When I was growing up in the suburbs of Paris. I'm originally from France. And there was a time I was in 6th grade, and I remember I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but the thought struck me, I want to study why I'm here. I want to study consciousness. And so this was my first encounter with consciousness, more an existential crisis of a 11-year-old. And that stuck. So I did a PhD in what we call computational neuroscience, which are the how the brain works, and then a postdoc on a similar topic, blending in with brainwave and meditation, and then studying mind wandering during meditation. And yeah, that's where I am right now. So I'm a professor equivalent. I don't teach, I just do research at UCSD, and also a research scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So the definition of consciousness is more like this sense of being we all have when we meditate. We know we're here, and some people say that's in it. You can't really define it in concept. You have to live it. It's like the color green. You can't define the color green to somebody that's colorblind. They have to experience it. So that's my definition of consciousness.
Yeah, one of the things that we've on these programs, we've talked a lot about extraordinary consciousness experiences that people have had, and a lot of them are scientists, and it's never been dogmatic for us. We were never interested in like spiritual dogma or anything like that, but it was just the spontaneous that came out. And one of the things that struck me was you said that what led you to your life's work was wanting to know why I'm here. And I had a extraordinary consciousness experience in my early 20s that really set the stage for me eventually spending my life organizing World Tai Chi Day and now the Global Transformation Project. And what happened was I went through a life crisis. You were talking about the existential crisis of an 11-year-old, but I had a life crisis in my 20s where I lost my parents and my youngest son within a short period of time, a few months. And one night I just got down on my knees by my bed and I said, I have to know why we're here. Why am I here? I just need to know that. And then that night I had an extraordinary consciousness experience that eventually, kind of led me down the road for the rest of my life. So it was really interesting to hear you say that wanting to know why you're here is what started all this for you.
Yeah, and I think we all had, this experience to some extent.
Yep, we're trying to figure it all out. Why are we here?
Doctor, can you explain the EEG software program that you created and how you're utilizing it?
Yeah, so that's my research specialized in meditation and brainwaves. So and mostly, more specifically, because now meditation is a big topic, on mind wandering during meditation, which I started to study because I do a lot of mind wandering during my meditation, and this wasn't studied at all. And so in the process of doing that, I'm a technical person by training, so more of I have a master in programming and a PhD in cognitive science, but so I wanted to process my brainwave data, and so I created that software, and we were lucky to have financing from National Institute of Health in the US for the past 20 years. And so that's the most used software to process brainwave data. It's free. Anybody can download it. It's for academics, basically, to process their own brainwave data, not only for meditation, for any kind of brainwave data. So it can be medical, Alzheimer or Parkinson or ADHD, or it can be just pure research, what happens in the brain when you're surprised or when you're creative, or when you're in movements.
I have a
The
question.
yeah.
One of the things, one of my students bought me something called the Muse headband.
Yeah,
Are you familiar with that?
very, yeah.
Yeah. Is that along the same lines of what you're talking about, or is there a difference between those?
Yeah, so if you want to record your own brainwave at home, you can buy the Muse. I think it's $300, $400
Uh-huh.
on Amazon, and it's going to give you decent data. The difference with research data is when we have research data, we'll have what we call them lead. So we'll have about 64 to 128 leads.
Uh-huh.
And when you have the Muse, it's only 4 leads. The data is not worse. We've done experiment actually with the Muse. The advantage of using the Muse is more that you can have many people. So we did experiment, in retreats where we had 300 people. And it's very hard to get data on 300 people with the higher density montage. This takes a long time to put on, etc. The Muse, you just put it on. The only difference is, with this system, you only get 4 leads, so 4 channels instead of 64. So you can't really know where it's coming from in the brain. You just know something's happening. That's the main difference. So so our software is very successful, and I attribute a lot of the success with what we have a plug-in mechanism. So we have people in the sleep, they have their plugin, etc. There's like 130 plugin to our software, so I think that's why it was so successful.
Now, is this something that anybody can use, or how access, or how does that work?
Yeah, anybody can download it, but usually you won't be able to do very much with it unless you have some expertise in processing brainwave data.
Oh, okay.
Lots of it you can click around and plot some things, but it's usually for doing statistics and preparing your data for publication. So it's more for scientists. You can import the Muse data, and look at it. I actually have a 4-part course on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel that's very popular. We got
how do people find that?
What is it called on YouTube?
It's called EEG Lab.
EEG Lab. And then can I ask
YouTube channel.
Can I ask you about the gamma activity? Because I was reading on your website that meditators have more gamma waves, but then they have peak concentration. So they have a higher gamma wave, but then is something else lowered? Like their other systems in the brain are more calm?
Yeah, so just to finish that thought. So on our YouTube channel, we have a 4-part teaching series on how to use the Muse for research. Because I was teaching a course, so I just made some videos. So you can check that out if you want to process your data. But it's more for research purposes rather than fun. Although lots of people like me have fun doing research. So if you're technically
I thought the Muse. I thought when I used the Muse, I thought it was a lot of fun. It was like a video game with my mind.
Yeah, and so to come back to the gamma, so we did this experiment in India where we studied different meditation practices. And the reason we did that, it was already like almost 15 years ago now, is that at the time, and that's still the case, you see paper in the literature, so in the scientific journal, they just say meditation, makes you, does this, meditation does that, meditation and immunology, and meditation and, your immune system, meditation and your concentration. But they didn't say what type of meditation. So what we intended to do in this study, in which we showed, gamma increases, is that we went to India. There was an ashram, so it's like a meditation center. They had bought this very expensive EEG equipment, because the one that has 64 or 128 leads, they're like from 30 to 100K, $100,000 sometimes. So, they bought this very expensive system. They didn't know what to do. So they invited us to do a study. And what we decided to do was to study different meditation traditions to see not which one was the best, but more to compare and contrast. And if possible, having people stop saying just meditation, because there's very, very different types of meditation. There's mantra meditation, so you repeat the mantra. There is Vipassana meditation, you do some kind of body scan. So we tested these two. We also tested Sunya meditation, which is a type of Zen meditation. And we compared them to control. So basically we had meditators coming to the lab. So it was in India, it was at the foot of the Himalayas. And the advantage of India is that our meditators were very experienced. We had people who were just meditating 4 hours a day. And you rarely see that in the West because people are just too busy. You can't just meditate 4 hours a day and have a job. But in India, apparently it's possible. And so what we found is we found elevated gamma power. So gamma power is this very fast oscillation in the brain. This would go really fast. So you have the slow ones, slow ones is alpha. Alpha is 10 hertz, 10 oscillation per second. And when you close your eyes, you have increase in alpha. And it's called alpha, which is the first letter in the Greek alphabet, because it was the first one to be discovered. I think in the 1930s by Hansberger. He had telepathy experience with his sister, and he wanted to know what happens in the brain. So he created the EEG in 1929 or 1923. I think we're the 100 years of EEG right now. Anyway, that's a little story. But the first brainwave that was observed was alpha. It's very high amplitude, very easy to see in the data. Then there's faster oscillation, that's gamma. And this faster oscillation has been linked to depth of meditation. And so what we show in this study is we had about 20 meditators in each of the traditions, plus some controls. We didn't know any meditation. And what we found is that all the meditators had increased gamma compared to the controls. And then there's different interpretation why this is the case.
If I could ask a question. Now, were you doing this while they were meditating?
Yes, we were doing while they were meditating, but also while we asked them to do what's called instructed mind wandering. So we just asked them to have, deliberately have thoughts, because also the meditators, it's very hard just to tell them do nothing. So we have, if they do nothing, they go into meditation, especially the very experienced ones. So we ask them to keep their mind busy with thoughts. So we call that instructed mind wandering. So they had to do this task as well. But
so you could get so you can see the difference. Now, when you were detecting the higher level gamma, was that what I'm curious of is, was that during meditation? So were they in alpha and higher gamma at the same time, or?
Yeah, I mean, you're not in one frequency bands or the other. They all express at the same time. So, it's not because they have gamma, but they stop having alpha. You have alpha and gamma. And by the way, the real meaning of these frequency bands is not well understood. There is a lot of, for example, alpha is like the resting state of the brain. So you close your eyes, you have increased alpha. So a lot of these brainwaves, they're interpreted when they're here, less happens. And, that could be the case for gamma as well. Gamma is more considered like the, more local processing in the brain, and the lower frequencies, which are more, distance communication between brain areas. But yeah, we don't understand fully what these brainwave represent yet. So we found some increased gamma, but it doesn't mean that. We also found some difference in alpha. For example, the Vipassana meditators, which do body scan meditation, which requires lots of concentration on the body. For some reason, they had greatly increased alpha compared to other meditators and controls.
Now,
And then,
one thing that I've read was that there's been an association of, well, it was an article that was actually on where they were studying monks, and who knows, you might have been involved in it. I just read about it in some magazine. But anyway, they noticed that they had very high level gamma wave consciousness, and what they suggested in that article was that gamma wave consciousness can be related to kind of more elegant, multi-dimensional consciousness, where you get those aha moments.
Yeah, it's very hard to say from a neuroscience perspective, because these moments are very fleeting. So yeah, I don't think anybody has pinpointed what happens in the brain during these aha moments. Also, they're very hard. You need to be able to study these phenomena. You need to be able to reproduce them at will in the lab, meaning you need to have somebody in the lab, and you tell them, you're going to have an aha moment right now.
Yeah.
So that's very difficult.
Yeah.
We have done experiments where, we ask people to press a button. Okay, press a button when you experience that. And we were able to study this, but aha moments are so rare that it's very hard to study them using this methodology. But if something that's frequent enough, then you can ask people, okay, whenever you're experiencing that, just press a button. And then we look at the brain activity when that happens. But that only works for frequent events. If it's very rare, yeah, you can't just record a meditator 1 month hoping they'll have one aha moment.
Yeah.
And to publish a paper, you would need like 20 people. So do that with 20 people. Yeah, unless you can't do that. You're
When I was watching one of the videos where you were talking about mediumship, mediums, like we would call them psychics. You know what I mean? And you were talking, you were looking at the brainwave changes when mediums went into a mediumship state, and I've actually been to psychics, over the decades in my life, and and some of them, a couple of them were like really accurate in a lot of ways. But the biggest mediumship experience that I ever had was my sister had one. And and if you ask my sister if she was a medium, she would be revolted. She's not that kind of person. But she had a dream one night, and it was a real, it was a medium experience. She was having a conversation with our mother who'd passed months before, and that was the most powerful mediumship that I'd ever experienced. But it wasn't. But my sister, she wouldn't even admit that she had it. Because it's not really accepted, but she had it. And so that's what I was thinking about when I was thinking about that when I saw your program, was that it's probably very difficult to study consciousness because so many of these really powerful things are just spontaneous things that, just kind of come out of nowhere. Like I remember Fritjof Capra, who wrote the Tao of Physics, he was a physicist, but then what led him to spend his life studying consciousness was that he had like a Kundalini experience on a beach, and he wasn't into yoga or anything like that. He was just sitting there on a beach and went into a state, had a big experience, and then it got him to study that for the rest of his life. And so, yeah, that must be very difficult as a scientist because, some of these big, powerful experiences are really unpredictable.
Yeah, so that's another story. So I got interested also into mediumship. I mean, you call them psychic, but psychics and mediums are slightly different. Some do both.
How would you describe the difference?
Well, the difference is mediums, they report trying to communicate with some of your deceased relative, where the psychic, they try to predict the future.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and the reason
I've been to people that called themselves psychics that did the other thing too.
Yeah, sometimes they do both.
Yeah.
And the reason I was interested in this topic is, if the Eastern, philosophy teaching are true, and, also you have special powers of the yogis, which are called the siddhis, like clairvoyance, you can have perception sometimes of the future, etc. And this is based on their model of consciousness, but consciousness is not just in the brain, it's more than the brain. We also published a paper that's called Is Consciousness in the Brain? With questioning like this assumption that consciousness must be in the brain, which is the hypothesis that I would say more than 90% of neuroscientists believe. Anyway, if we want to question that, we can test these people, the psychics or the mediums, because if they can do accurate prediction, and I don't think we've shown that they can, but also we've shown interesting results, that warrant more investigation, then yeah, it could validate these models of consciousness, where consciousness is not bound by space and time, and it's potentially more than in the brain. So that was the angle. That was why I was interested in mediumship. There was no assumption that spirits necessarily exist. It was more like, is there abnormal phenomena we're not able to explain with modern science? And also science, because some scientists will say, well, this is pseudoscience. There's no pseudoscience. Science is a method, so you can use the method on anything you want.
I think that pseudoscience label gets thrown around a lot in popular culture because there's kind of a materialistic, almost cult-like thinking that isn't really backed up by science, but a lot of mainstream popular culture and media, they kind of adopt that kind of materialistic dogma approach, and it colors the way that they talk about these things. So that pseudoscience thing, that's been thrown around at some really good scientists. So,
yeah, so science is just a method. There's no pseudoscience. There's just bad science.
On the non-local consciousness thing, one of the things that really was huge with me was in 2007, I read about the Global Consciousness Project, Dr. Roger Nelson's project, which is also part of IONS now. And so what they had computers all over the planet, random event generators, and they would see the random event generators go off when big global events would happen where people's consciousness was coming into coherence. And I think Princess Diana's funeral was the first one that they really noted. And so we contacted them in 2007, and we said, we organized this World Tai Chi Day where people all over the planet do different kinds of meditative practices for 24 hours. And they said they'd look at it. And so they did. And we had shown during that 24-hour period, there had been a measurable change in the coherence of global consciousness. It was a 0.05 P score, and that was pretty common. So the International Day of Yoga showed about the same, and International Peace Meditation. And the thing about it is that when we were doing World Tai Chi Day every year, there were days, it wasn't every year that I felt that, but there were years when it just felt way different when we were doing it while the people around the planet were doing it than it did when we just did it by ourselves or in our classes. And then I would get emails from other Tai Chi teachers around the planet, and they would go, wow, that felt really great. It felt really special, on that day, 24-hour period doing it with people around the planet. And we just kind of wrote it off as, maybe our imaginations. But then when we contacted the Global Consciousness Project and started getting the data from, that came out of the early Princeton University research at Paralabs, that was real validating. You know what I mean? To realize, well, no, we hadn't really been just imagining that. We had actually been having a phenomenon that we were experiencing, and then we were able to see it, measurably supported by the Global Consciousness Project's data.
Could I ask a question going back to the, testing the mediums? Did you find, compared to meditators, different parts of their brains were active, or were they the same?
It's hard to infer, with brainwave, it's hard to infer where it comes from the brain. It's not as precise as what we call functional imaging resonance. fMRI. fMRI is, is a technique where you go and you can, if you have a stroke, they can clearly delineate where it is. With EEG, we just have the sensors on the head, and then we have to try to calculate where it comes from. So what we found mostly difference in the frontal areas and the, what we call, the back of the head, the perceptual areas. So this is where we found the most difference between the control and the meditators. And the conclusion of that paper was that there is something common to all the meditation tradition, which is what we wanted to show, because in these days, the meditation word was thrown around. Everybody was talking about meditation, and there were very different types of meditation. So we wanted to show there is something common in the different meditation tradition. And we were able to do that. And the difference we observed mostly at very high frequency in the gamma band over frontal areas and perceptual areas in the back of the head.
But with mediums, was it similar, or you can't compare?
Well, you can compare. You can always compare. With medium, what we found in one medium was increase over the frontal areas here, but not in gamma, more in theta. So theta is 5 hertz, so it's low frequency. And this area right here, in theta is linked to your working memory. So if I ask you to remember a phone number, if there is let's say I ask you to remember a phone number with 10 digits and then another phone number with only 6 digits, because it's different country, who knows, but it's like 2 different working memory load. So, one that's hard with lots of digits and one that's easy with less digits. We can show that this area is active less when you have less digits. And so our interpretation is that when she was doing her mediumship, she was emptying her mind, basically, because there was a decrease in this area. So she was using her working memory less. So this is what we show in that specific study. And we also have other studies that show that experienced meditators, so that's a different study, but experienced meditators also show some difference in that specific brain area at that frequency.
So are you saying that both of them are emptying their minds?
So the meditators, we also observe a decrease in frontal midline theta in this area. I would have to see if it's a decrease or an increase. Also, there is different role for this brain area. So it's not only working memory, it's also a capacity to concentrate. So what we found in meditators is that this area was overactivated. So our interpretation, she was kind of going, the medium, she was kind of going in a different direction than the meditators, but she was, using the same brain area. In meditators, what we did, so with us is another experiment we did in India, in which we had 2 groups of meditators, very experienced and not experienced. And now we did a different experiment in which we just interrupted them during their meditation. And we asked them every minute or so, how is the depth of your meditation? Are you mind wandering right now? And of course, it's not someone that just asked them, it's computer generated. So it's every minute for an hour. Every minute and a half, it's random. It doesn't happen always at the same time. And then they just press a keypad on their lap, even without continuing their meditation. So then we analyze the brain. So what's the brain like when they're very concentrated in their meditation, or when they're distracted, when they're mind wandering? And again, we found this frontal midline theta difference, although it was more in the opposite direction. Also, this study was very interesting because it's the first one that shows that for expert meditators, they did less mind wandering. And, that sounds obvious. Well, you do meditation, you're able to concentrate better, your mind is less distracted, but it's very hard to show from a scientific perspective. So from our knowledge, this is the first study, and it was published in 2013, that we showed that scientifically, because we're using statistics, We had hundreds of button presses from more than 20 participants. We showed for the first time that the advanced meditators have decreased mind wandering and increased meditation depth compared to beginners.
Yeah, and one of the programs that I saw you in, I don't want to cut you off, Siobhan. So if go ahead if you're still talking about this, because this is it's related, but it's a little different.
I was just going to ask, why does our mind wander? Why does that happen?
So yeah, so you got to read the book. I wrote the book on.
I'm going to
And
order
we'll put it up on the video.
Why are mind wanders? So why are mind wanders? So it's like that's a long story. It's not
okay. We'll get the book. So
then I'll this is related to that, I guess. I heard you say in one of the other programs that I saw you in that what you found is that we're less happy when our mind is wandering more, and that completely resonates with my clinical decades of teaching meditation. Is when students whose minds are just bouncing all over the place, they're not as happy as the people that are present.
Yeah, and so this is a study that was done in 2011 by Harvard scientists, in which they developed this program. So I signed up to the program, and you receive 2 or 3 text messages per day at random time, and then you just have to answer: Are you distracted right now? Are you focusing on what you're doing? So, for example, if you're doing the dishes, are you thinking about what's next, or are you just doing mindfulness while you're doing the dishes, really concentrating on doing the dishes? Same thing, when you're biking. I remember receiving this text. I was biking, so you stop, you feel, oh yeah, I was doing this. And then they also ask you, are you happy right now? And so what they found, I think there was 5,000 participants to that study, that signed up online to do that experiment. They found that whatever the activity, people were happier when they're not mind wandering, when they are not distracted. So even if it's washing the dishes, you're happier if you're just focusing on, the sensation of the water on your hands, just concentrating on washing the dishes, rather than thinking what's next after you're done washing the dishes. When you're biking, you're happier if you're, doing the actual biking and, enjoying the scenery, rather than thinking, what's next. And it's for all types of activities. So they listed 20 different types of activity. And what's interesting is that even very pleasurable activities, people really like doing, they were less happy. I mean, you can easily understand that. You're watching a movie you're really enjoying, where you're not going to be as happy if you're really in the movie compared to thinking about something else. And so that's one side of mind wandering. Mind wandering makes us unhappy, but mind wandering during meditation, and also has a role. For example, it has been shown that if I let you mind wander, you're going to be more creative. How do we test that? Well, we test that is, we ask people, doesn't have to be artists, but we ask them to come up with uses of specific object. So for example, we show them a brick, and they have like 2 minutes or up to 5 minutes sometimes. And then we ask them, what can you do with that object? Well, it's a brick. I can build houses, but I can also use it, a paperweight. And, if I'm stuck inside a house, I can use it to break a window. So come up with creative uses. And what happens is that if I show you the object, and then I let you mind wander for a couple of minutes, you are more creative compared to if I ask you to do something like, I ask you to do math, you have to concentrate on doing math, you're going to be less creative. So there is something to be said about mind wandering and creativity. And the role of mind wandering is not well understood. One hypothesis is that it's a micro sleep. So yeah, you're doing it's both a micro sleep and also helps you order basically the task you have to do. So imagine you're meditating and you're never mind wandering. So if you're concentrated in your meditation and you're not mind wandering at all, well, you might get stuck in your meditation forever and die of hunger. So if the thoughts doesn't pop up in your mind, oh, maybe I should eat something. What's for dinner? So that could be one role of mind wandering, is to order your different tasks in your mind. So that's one role. And then the other role, which is another paper we published, is about might be about micro sleep. So what we did is we had people in the lab, and they were mind wandering at some time, meditating at other times. We showed that basically their brain, as measured by the EEG, was less responsive when they were mind wandering. So they're just like, and it's the same for sleep. When you're sleeping, your brain is less responsive to sound you hear. They can still wake you up, but you're much less responsive. So when we presented the sound, the brain response was lower when they were mind wandering. And our interpretation is that it's because mind wandering could be a form of micro sleep. So your brain needs to rest. When you're doing lots of concentrative tasks, your brain needs to rest, and it just goes into mind wandering mode, where you just think about random things.
In my classes, I've come to start talking to students about the fact that when we do meditation, especially when we do them on our own and they're not being guided like in a class, the mind's going to wander. It's going to wander all over the place. And so like one of the meditations we do is a counting mantra meditation. And I always suggest to students that there's two main ways the mind can drift. One way is where you kind of drift into like what I call a meditative reverie, where you're not really thinking in words, but you just kind of get lost and you don't quite know where you went. And then there's the other kind of thinking that you can get tangled up in, which is linear problem solving, regretting, planning, fearing of the future, all those kind of things. And so I'm always encouraging people to not hold the mantra meditation too tightly, because you do want the mind to be able to drift. But if you notice it getting tangled up in a linear problem solving thought, come back to the process, come back to the tongue, the breath, the sensation, the counting. And then in that way, the mantra becomes a vessel for your consciousness to flow through. But you don't want to squeeze that vessel too tight, because you want the mind to have the freedom to be able to, make those drifts in consciousness.
Yeah, and mind wandering during meditation is tricky, because all of us who have experienced meditation, we are very judgmental about our meditation. And usually it's about the mind wandering during meditation. It's like, did we do the meditation well? Well, it depends how concentrated we were, and we tend to judge ourselves. I'm Zen meditator, and we're told, don't judge yourself, for any thoughts you might have, but you still do it. You can't help. You have a good meditation sessions, like, oh, you were really in the now, concentrated, or do you have a bad one where you are completely distracted? So that's why there is one meditation, tradition, which I like, and also has a different stance on that, because that's the transcendental meditation. So transcendental is a mantra based practice, and I was lucky to also be trained in transcendental meditation. And for transcendental meditation, if you have mind wandering, it's like thoughts bubbling up in your mind, and it's actually a good thing. Yep. It's like you're releasing some kind of energy of the thoughts. And so basically in transcendental meditation, it is a good thing to mind wander, because you got a lot of thoughts bubbling up and releasing their energy.
Yeah.
So it really, I don't know if, transcendental meditation is better or not, but it allows you to judge yourself less at the end of the meditation, because you're not like, I had a good meditation or bad meditation. If you were distracted a lot, the interpretation could be that, yeah, you had a lot of thoughts bubbling up, and actually you release a lot of these thoughts, and now you're more free from them. So it was a good meditation, but you did a lot of mind wandering. So it's all a matter of perspective, whether mind wandering is good or bad during meditation. I think the general stance, the monkey mind, or they call it, in the Eastern tradition, says mind wandering is not good during meditation. Mind wandering is the enemy. But because that brings so much judgment, also good to have practices where, you can see it from a different perspective.
Yeah, I tell my students that what I got good at with meditation, it wasn't so much stopping my mind from wandering, but it was that I got really good at being very patient with myself and realizing that that was all part of the process. So I didn't waste any time beating myself up for my mind wandering. I just breathed and let it go, and breathed and let it go. And so then I'm coming back to the meditation sooner, and I don't get tangled up in things as far because I keep coming back. And I talk about Suzuki. He was a keto master. And he said, when we go into the states of meditation, he goes, the front door and the back door of our consciousness are wide open. And so all kinds of things are going to come through our living room. We just don't invite them to stop and have tea. And so it's like, the things are coming through, like you're saying, they're unloading. But what we do in our practice is we're always just trying to let our consciousness and our being and field just sigh, so that we let go around those things. And we don't invite them to stop and have tea, but we don't suppress them. We don't reject them. We don't think of as bad. We know that it's an unloading. And then we just breathe and let go, breathe and let go, breathe and let go while this unloading occurs. And so we're just not inviting them to stop and have tea, kind of thing.
Can I share a personal story with my practice? When I do a type of Qigong, I was taught to be very present, not to flow into like an ecstasy state, which is very easy to do, and just to bring back to grounding and be very centered. And I resisted that because I like that ecstatic state. But what I found was when I stayed very present and was very grounded, after the practice, all these ideas would come up, the creativity. So if I postponed the gratification of that ecstasy, later on I had all this prolific creativity. So I guess it's just all the practices are different, and our interpretation of what happens and whether we're wandering or being present. I guess it just is.
Well, I mean, I think if we're what we get into in our classes, if the mind starts wandering, trying to balance your bank account or your checkbook, that's not very conducive to a meditative experience. But if your mind wanders and all of a sudden you're just kind of floating through clouds and flying over trees, you know what I mean? How your mind will just go into reverie. Right. So yeah, it's like there's for me, there's that's kind of the two big categories. Is it linear thought or is it some other kind of consciousness? You know what I mean?
Interesting. We have a question from our audience, so I'm going to bring Gloria McCahill, who is a fellow practitioner out in Arizona, has a very interesting question. Go ahead, Gloria.
Hi, I'm thoroughly enjoying this, by the way. I was curious if you'd ever done any studies with anybody that's had an out-of-body experience.
I haven't specifically, but we're planning some, specifically using VR, so virtual reality, because you have this illusion that's called the rubber hand illusion. And the way the rubber hand illusion is, you put a fake arm and then you hide people's arm. So let's say this is my fake arm, and it's just a piece of rubber. And my real arm is hidden behind my back, or, it's hidden on the side of the body. But I'm looking at my fake arm, it looks to me like that's my real arm. And so what you do is that you can you can use like a brush, and then you can brush simultaneously the fake arm and the real arm, that's on the side of my body. And then people really start identifying, oh, this is my real arm, even though you know it's rubber, you feel like it's my real arm. And what scientists do sometimes, is like you come with a hammer and you slam the hammer on the fake arm, and people really have a startling reaction. I mean, that they don't do that necessarily, but so that's with the hand. But you can do the same with the body in VR, in which people see their virtual body, and you have a brush in VR that strokes their virtual body, like their arm on their virtual body, and at the same time stroke their real body, and they identify with the body. And so that's one way we are trying to induce out-of-body experience in the lab. It's extremely hard to induce out-of-body experience at will. There are some people who can do it too, and I know some reports of that. So some people who've been studying out-of-body in specific individual, because this guy can do out-of-body at will. But usually you have to come up with protocols which are a bit more complex.
Yeah. Have you had an out-of-body experience, Gloria?
I did. I've had one full one and one I call half one, because I was kind of fighting it at the time. But I was just wondering, like, what kind of waves you would be using conscious-wise, when you talk about gamma, theta, alpha, all of that, during that experience,
Were any of your out-of-body experiences at night?
No, mine actually occurred. I was learning Reiki for the first time, and it was a fellow practitioner that was working on me, and my eyes started flipping in and out instead of up and down. And the next thing I knew, I was like, I couldn't tell whether I was a body or I was part of the earth, or I had no consciousness or whatever of what I was or what I belonged to.
Did it feel like you were connected to everything?
Yes, it was a complete connection to everything. There was no distinction, other than I could feel a sense of soaring, extremely fast flying. And then I saw myself over the Middle East. I mean, I saw myself over a building in the Middle East. And at that point, I fought it and came out of it, because I'm kind of a control freak, and I didn't like the idea that I wasn't in control, although I wish I could repeat it now. But it was...
I had one, and it was like an expansion experience, and I could see the earth below and everything. And then I got scared. And the instant that I got scared, I just like slammed back into my body. It was like somebody slammed a cosmic vault or something. It was like woof. And as the collapse was happening, it was like I got this kind of message, and it said, fear closes all doors, fear closes all doors, fear closes all doors. It said that 3 times.
Yeah, I totally believe that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but it was exhilarating.
Yeah.
One of the things that came out of Dr. Penberthy's interview with us was how common a lot of these experiences are, and just that I don't know, a stigma. People aren't, they're discussing it in their personal groups, but there's more people out there having experiences, right, Bill?
Siobhan, that was so liberating for me to have Dr. Penberthy on talking about the data and see how common this is. Because, like, for me, it took me a lot of years to be able to talk about these kind of experiences. And once we had Dr. Penberthy on, it's like I'm fearless now, because I know I'm in the majority. That was so liberating. Yeah.
It might be interesting right now with the group that we have, if people would raise their virtual hand just to say that they've had an extraordinary consciousness experience. If you guys feel,
yeah, let's do that. Let's all raise our hands.
Most people already, we've got people raising their hands.
Now, how do you raise your hand? I'm not seeing how to do that.
Well, you scroll, you take your cursor, and it highlights down below, like participants, stop video, notes, and then there's 3 dots that say more, and it says reactions. So if you hit the little side reactions, you can
Mine
do a
just says
thumbs
breakout.
up.
Mine just says breakout. Oh, I see reactions. I've got a reactions button. Let me check that.
Right,
Okay,
right.
so yeah, so let's put our thumb up if we, or raise our hand if we've had a extraordinary consciousness experience. I'm just curious to see whether we're statistically in the ballpark here.
How are we doing here? Let me look.
Well, I'm
A
only
lot,
seeing
a
the
lot of
top row
people
there.
are raising their hand, and I'm sure some people are a little shy to do so, but
Well,
that
we won't force you to confess it.
well, thank you, Gloria, for that question. Do you have any other questions, Gloria?
No, not yet. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that was great.
So, Doctor, do you have any other points that you felt were important to bring up today in the discussion?
No, I think, we talked of all the important topic, I feel. Yeah.
Well, I really want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I think this is just so important to the future of the planet. And
What is your current study right now? Or do you have an experiment that you're doing currently, or a couple of them?
Yeah, we're doing several experiments. Right now, I'm doing meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is processing lots of data. So because we have these software tools and we have supercomputers, and now with artificial intelligence, we can mine the data much better than we used to. So lots of my projects are on that. Just use data from previous experiments. We've done lots of experiments, just put them all together and work with AI basically to, find new phenomena in that old data.
Okay, and your book again, I'll repost, is Why Our Minds Wander. And Bill, do you have any other questions or thoughts on?
Well, I was going to comment on one thing, because earlier you were kind of touching on the non-locality of consciousness. And what I did was, over the 40 years, after I had that extraordinary consciousness experience, I just started collecting data on consciousness and mind-body science. And I just collected as much as I could. It eventually became like a 700-page book called The Gospel of Science. And it just seems like, when you look at the overarching, breadth of research that's been done at IONS and, through the Transcendental Meditation Foundation's research and so on and so forth, it just seems like it's pretty conclusive that consciousness is not local. So because you were saying you're going to do meta-analysis, and so I've been doing kind of an informal meta-analysis, just collecting, all the science that I came across. And I just don't see how you could just have study after study after study after study that shows that consciousness is non-local, and then still have 90% of the scientists going, no, it's not.
Well, one reason is there's many reasons. One reason is there's very little models. If consciousness is not local, what is consciousness? And there's not that many model. Or the working model, our working model is more like linked with Eastern tradition. Consciousness is part of the fabric of nature. But how is consciousness part of the fabric of nature? Then you have different model. You have like idealism. Everything emerges from consciousness. Or panpsychism. Consciousness is just part of the whole, and all the objects are conscious. So it's very hard to zero in on the specific model and test that specific model. So I think that's one reason, beyond all the other political reasons. I call them political, meaning that, you know, it's risky for scientists to voice these hypotheses because, you know, they can lose their job, etc.
Yeah, Jack Kelly at the
so-
university, Dr. Kelly at the University of Virginia, when he went into researching consciousness, his people in his department said, you're gonna end your career.
Yeah. So yeah, so same thing. But, you know, one reason remains that, you know, we have, the working model. We don't have like a working model. If consciousness is more than the brain, is more, you know, goes beyond the materialist paradigm, what is it? And, you know, there's not a clear scientific model we can test. And because science work with, you know, you have a model and you test it and you try to invalidate that model.
Yeah.
So there's still, you know, reasonable reasons why, you know, this
but
is,
you know, you look at, I just want to throw this out to you, you know, because you're a scientist and I'm not, but it seems like, you know, when you look at the double slit experiments, it seems conclusive that, you know, the behavior of matter is influenced by, you know, the conscious attention of the observer. So it just seems like that, because that goes right to the heart of existence, you know, the behavior of particles.
Yeah, and I participate to some of these experiments, but if you read the paper, it's not like we have a clear model. This is how consciousness influenced the beam of photon. You know,
but how is different than it does.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I agree. I mean, the data is there. The data is relatively convincing. We just have to work out the model.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting. We're cheering for you. Work out the models.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. I put in chat your book and your contact information, and I'd like to point out that on Sunday, February 18th, we have Dr. Annie Kalajian, and she is associated with the UN, and she's not only a professor of psychology, but the founder of Meaningful World, which is a very exciting nonprofit group that goes to trauma-torn areas throughout the world to teach the academics as well as other professionals on how to work with people who are experiencing these traumatic events, such as
Siobhan, one of the things that was very exciting when I found out we were going to have her on is that, the research some of the research that I cite in the book, it shows that regular meditators, it increases the empathy and compassion parts of the brain. So not just the activity, and I'm curious whether you've seen any of this indication as to this or looked at it, Dr. Arnaud, but it actually increases the size of the empathy and compassion parts of the brain and shrinks the stress and fear parts of the brain. And so that's one of the things that was so exciting about the Global Transformation Project, is if we can provide students with tools that will foster an increase in empathy and compassion and a reduction in fear and stress around the planet, that it could have global implications for the future of humanity. And so have you, Dr. Arnaud, have you looked at or the concept of how the empathy and compassion parts of the brain become more activated? And I've read studies that showed when they studied monks that were in meditation, and then when they exposed them to pictures of people in distress, not only did they have a heightened empathy for the distress of the person, but the action part of their brain also went into a higher state, so that they were felt more activated or felt more of an impulse to do something to help relieve. You know what I mean? Not that they would actually do that. It was a picture, but you know what I mean, like that.
Yeah, I feel so in meditation, we tend to say that, you know, it's more equanimity, which is increased more necessary than empathy. And empathy is you know, could be increased as well, but it's more equanimity, which is more like a more neutral stance. So you, like, for example, an experienced meditator could have increased empathy, but it would go quickly, you know, whereas we could be very empathetic ourselves, and, you know, it might stay up with the entire day. We would be upset, you know, we saw this horrible thing on TV, these children dying or something. And yeah, we have, you know, a lot of compassion, but, you know, we also are upset. And the experienced meditators, they have lots of empathy, but, you know, they might not get, they can let it go quicker. So yeah, just
I find that
small refinement. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that in my personal life, because, you know, I meditate every day, and I'm able to, I'm very interested in global affairs, but I don't watch a lot of mainstream media because I find that it's fear-based and, you know, just kind of reactive. It's not really information-based. So I do research, you know, I read up on issues and topics and things like that. And then I share it with a lot of my friends, you know, whoever's unfortunate enough to be on my phone list. And it overwhelms most of my friends to become aware of, you know, facts that are not necessarily comforting. But for me, I just keep going back to my meditation. So I'm able to entertain hard truths that are overwhelming for, you know, my friends and family that I share it with. But I don't feel overwhelmed by it because I've got the meditation, and I keep coming back to that, you know, that central state. And so I think one of the things that meditation can offer us is the ability to look right in the face of reality more effectively, because we don't have to fear, you know, being overwhelmed and depressed by, you know, exploring truths, because truth's not always comfortable.
Wonderful. So let me just finish about the February speaker, which is on February 18th. So she may not have like scientific facts about her work, but it's about the method that she helps people handle trauma through mind-body practices. It's so interesting. So this is like an actual how to work with people directly. She uses flower essences and Reiki. And it's nice to know about the practical uses of these mind-body practices.
Well, that's, well, you know, on a global scale, what you're talking about is, you know, going to help folks in places where there's catastrophes. But that's one of the things that I found so compelling about the Global Transformation Project goal of getting this into public education around the world, because if we can shift or enhance the empathy and compassion abilities of students, and I think when the mind's not spinning, we have a natural propensity to be more empathetic and compassionate. It's just human nature. You know, we're a social species. And so by expanding this through classrooms around the planet, most of the horrific things that happen around the planet could be avoided simply by people being more conscious. So if we were more conscious, because I was talking about, you know, being able to look at hard realities and hard truths, if we can look at those without being discombobbled by them, then we have the ability to, you know, for society to take different paths that don't lead to these cataclysms around the planet. Because like just the current cataclysms that we're going through, you know, that are filling the airwaves, they could have all been avoided, you know, with people being empathetic with what other people's needs were and concerns were and fears were. It's when those get ignored that it escalates into something horrific. And so it just keeps bringing me back to if we can be teaching students all over the planet how to go into these higher states where their minds aren't spinning and they have a more natural empathetic connection to the planet and they feel more connected to it, because that's what the science shows. is we feel more connected when we practice these things. And then we could be heading off these disasters, rather than going and trying to put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound.
Yes, I agree. Okay, and then just to let everybody know that we again are selling the what Bill is wearing, the World Tai Chi and Qigong Day t-shirts, and they help fund our project of the Global Transformation Project. And we are booked solid with guests through August of this year. And we actually have a person, a researcher in Egypt, who will be joining us in July from Egypt about how the ancient Egyptians with the mind-body practices. So we have an exciting lineup. And thank you today, Doctor, for joining us. Do you have any other parting words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me and for the work you do.
Well, thank you.
That reminds me. Yeah, like I mentioned before the cameras came on, we have a tradition, now that you know the Global Transformation Project's goal of United Nations resolution advocating mind-body education for public education worldwide, we always offer our guests the invitation of adding your name to our list of esteemed science, health, and education experts who support this idea.
Sure, happy to.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, glad to have you.
And anytime you publish a book and you'd like us to promote it, we're more than happy to on the website.
Absolutely. We want everybody to be educated about the work you're doing. Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you again. And we hope to see everybody in February, which is February 18th at 4 p.m. Eastern. And thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of the weekend.
Breathing each other, there is no